Coming up next, how to stand out from the crowd and learn how to inspire others with leadership expert Allan Milham. Do you ever wonder who's in charge these days? In fact, in the world today, as companies close and businesses change, who in fact is the boss? Well, there's an opportunity out there. My guest today, Allan Milham, is here to talk about leadership and his expertise in that area. Allan, welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Allan, what is going on in terms of leadership in the world today?
Well, you know, it's a fascinating topic because we often think of leadership being, as you said, related to government or organization, work, but really leadership has to, in this day and age, start from an inside-out job. It's really starting with the individual. And we often think leading is really for them. And, you know, we need to be changing this conversation to make leadership a personal conversation.
Do you think that there is a lack of leadership going on out there?
Absolutely. The challenge we have right now is that we're really so living externally, right? We're getting 35,000 messages a day telling us who and what we should be, be it internet, media, television, etc. And they're winning. You know, you think about generationally, you know, about what car you should have, what you should wear, where you should live. And all of that is really impacting to having folks living more externally based versus, excuse me, internally based. And that's the challenge. My belief is that leadership really does start intuitively from the inside. And we need to be looking there in our families, in how we raise our children, as well as in our communities.
In the community, who out there decides who's the boss?
That's a great one, right. Well, again, because we're so externally based, we're looking for that external authority figure, right? And if you've tracked the statistics recently, that's not winning. You know, we have the highest level of unhappiness in our work. We have the highest level of unhappiness with our bosses. And the good news is, with all this change and shifting in America, we have more of a move to entrepreneurism, right? And a lot of them are saying, you know, I'm tired of being, you know, working with someone up there that doesn't know how to lead effectively, how to motivate, how to inspire. And so they're actually moving entrepreneurially and saying, you know, it's time for me to take over.
You know, that's such a great point. I mean, how can someone decide, you know what, it's time for me to step into that leadership role?
Right.
Like, what are the signals?
Well, the first one, which is on the road to what we call burnout, has to do with the dissatisfaction. If you're waking, I call it the Monday morning blues. If you're waking up on Monday morning and you're in that traditional 8 to 5 kind of thing, and you're noticing, for example, that you're dreading that, clue number one, right? So if you're coming home at the end of the day, and if you have loved ones, family and whatnot, and your reserve tank is on, clue number two, that you're draining your energy. And most likely it's a misalignment for what you're doing. So we really need to pause. We really need to quiet ourselves down, actually. You know, one of the things that I talk about is, you know, certainly television, news, and media, it's important for us to be plugged in, but we really need to force field ourselves with regard to how we're going to assimilate that information. Because for many of us, we're waking up, we're getting a download of that news, and then we wonder why all of a sudden we're driving to work and we're not in great shape, right? Because we're really taking in a lot of the negativity.
So like there's a little bit of like noise and pollution in terms of the messages that are out there.
That's right, yeah. Well, you know, I'd say actually, Kristen, it's like imagine you've got a 26-piece orchestra in your head of just pounding the noise. And what we need to do is really silence all that. And again, that's not going to come from living a life so externally based, but giving yourself time to be pausing in the morning. You know, with my executives and leaders that I work with, as well as everyday folks that I speak with, I ask the question, when you wake up in the morning, what would it be like to give yourself 120 seconds of nothing but quiet? Calm, no music, no TV going, you know, and I say 120 seconds because people believe that small little step is possible, right? You know, but we look at, you know, the Eastern impact of meditation. I think there's something going on if it's been going on for so many thousands of years, and we need to do that quieting so that we can actually hear what that whisper is about, intuiting for us what might be that next bold move.
You know, you talk about being an intuitive leader, and I do think you're so right. In that moment of quietness, we get that clarity, we get that inspiration.
That's right.
And then it seems like we get out inside the day.
That's
you know,
right.
I mean, how many times does that happen? You have this brilliant idea, and then 2 hours later, you know, all you're wondering is when the day's going to be over.
That's gone.
So how do you hold that inspiration? How do you hold that momentum as you go through everyday life?
Well, it's a great question because it really is about self-management, you know, and it's about
I like that, self-management.
Well, versus other management, which a lot of us are like, okay, we just, you know, we wake up with a hope or idea and then we have lost it by the time we got to work. So when we say self-management, it really is being able on a regular basis to notice your mood, right? If nothing else, as you're going through the day, because a lot of times we get jerked around, we get triggered by something, and then emotions come up, and then we're just sort of in a foul place. And if we can begin to just notice, in our work, we sort of talk about two little voices in our head, and I'm not referring to schizophrenia or multi-personality.
At least there's only two.
That's for what we do. And this comes actually from working with Olympians, coming back from going for the gold. And I was so fascinated how these 20 and 21-year-olds, I mean, I got how they were muscled into the sport. What I didn't understand is how they didn't freak out having billions of people watching them at such a young age.
Right.
And every one of them had the ability to really notice sort of who had that microphone in their head, whether it was negative, and you're going to fail, this isn't going to work, or a voice of possibility, right? That you're well conditioned for this, go for it. And that's what we need to be listening for, you know, because too many of us are listening to that negative noise machine in our head, and then we wonder why we're so dissatisfied.
How do we recognize and choose? Like, I mean, let's say we have these two microphones, you know, one's positive, you can do it, the other one's negative, you know, it's not going to happen for you. You know, how do you turn one down? Maybe you can never turn it off,
no, you don't
but turn the other one up.
That's a great, the thing is with that noticing. So when I talk about self-management, the first thing is just to notice who's got the microphone, and what volume level,
and whose voice is it, right? I mean, like, isn't that the truth?
Well,
sometimes it's somebody else's voice, but it's still in our head.
Could be. And the distinction is, one, in our work, we just sort of notice that negative voice has to do about motivate with fear and doubt. So it sort of has a scarcity thinking, like if I don't act real quickly, I'm going to lose out at this.
Right.
And we call that the brash or barely move maker, you know, in our bold moves discourse. So if we're coming from barely, you know, the barely move maker really may not even be getting to work because they're not getting out of bed. It's sort of a gived up, resigned feeling, and they're like, you know, I'm just going to call in sick. And unfortunately, we have way too many people in that condition right now.
Maybe almost barely breathing.
Yeah, well, I call it sort of almost flatlining, right?
Yeah.
If we look at their operating state, right, it's just, it's sort of a give up, hopeless kind of feel. And next to that is the brash move maker. Now that one's interesting because brash actually has energy with it. And we've got a lot of people, we can all be prone to brash moves through the day. Again, courted to fear and doubt, right? So all of a sudden it's a scarcity thought or I better act, and it's not coming from that best place.
Right.
And we can cite examples of large organizations to individuals who have made brash moves that have had huge negative consequence. And it's really in that self-managing, looking at what we call the bold move, right? Which is now not from fear and doubt, but more from hope and possibility. And it's a mindset. And again, we can all stumble a little bit, but if we can notice and then recalibrate, and again, it's in that pausing. Take a time out. If you get triggered by something in your work or whatever, you know, get outside, walk around for a moment, recalibrate, because you get to be a choice. But if we're not noticing, there's no choice.
Absolutely. Allan, tell me a little bit about your background. It's absolutely fascinating.
Well, you know, humbled, coming from, you know, the Midwest and growing up with really great childhood values, and then getting into corporate America. And, you know, everything about my upbringing was about success, right? And going for it.
Exactly.
And so for the first 10 years of my vocation, it was like as soon as I got a job and I got that business card, I'm like, great, what's next, right? It was still wet, and I'm looking at where do I need to go. And at 30, I had actually left a very big Fortune 200 company for an entrepreneurial opportunity, right? And I went from a very well-oiled machine to a 14-person engineering environment where they wore the same clothes every day and no one was perky but me. And I thought, oh my. And then the product didn't get off the ground. So that was 364 days of pain. And at the end of that, I asked the question for the first time in my life, Allan, with all due respect to everyone you've listened to, what do you want to do? And that really set the new path for me into the work that I do today as an executive coach, as a strategist, and really helping individuals. So, you know, I was the one at 12 where my brother was going to be in sales, and Scott was going to be a mechanic, and Ann was going to be a nurse, and I'm like, how do you know that? Like, I didn't get the chip.
Right.
And so I really believe that we're all here for purpose. We're all here. And if you're sitting right now in a place where you're not happy, or on the couch and feeling that it's a, you know, like a no-win and you're asking there's got to be something more, this is the conversation we want to have because it's our right to have it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important, you know, that conversation about who am I and how am I going to show up in this world?
That's right.
Because the world seems to have, for some of us, it's just obvious there's tons of opportunities,
That's right.
but we need to step into those opportunities.
That's right.
And for others of us, it just feels overwhelming.
It does, and it really comes back to just understanding who are we? You know, what's important to me? What are my values? I mean, anytime I see burnout in a traditional work setting, it normally means the person's individual defined or undefined values are at odds with what's happening, you know, and that just is going to burn us out. So it really starts very simply by just taking stock of, you know, who am I? You know, what's most important to me from a value perspective, from a strength perspective, you know, and then build from there. But holding, you know, that positive voice, we refer to it as the whisper in our novel, the Bold Blues book. And we call it the whisper because of that, what I said earlier, you know, this deafening, you know, 26-piece orchestra pounding noise to distract us. And that intuitive message often comes in very quietly. And we need to calm down to be able to hear that and then pay attention to it and to seed it and to nurture it. Yeah. So
tell me a little bit about the book.
Well, it's a very interesting book. We, as you can imagine, it really is three things in one. It is a novel about a visionary CEO who's the head of a global thrills entertainment company, very successful, and he's really looking to say, how do I where's my next bold move leader? You know, where am I going to find that person? And through a series of his experiences, he ends up hiring a professional coach, and he gets interviewed in a way that he says, I do this kind of interviewing. You know, people don't talk to me this way. And he hires this coach, and the coach says, you know, this will be great, but I'm going to send you something by FedEx, and you need to read it. And again, he's like, people don't tell me what to do, but I'm in. And it's a fable. And it's a journey about three little tadpoles named Jump, Croak, and Plop. And it's Jump's journey from the marsh into the human world. And we did that in a way so that readers could be engaged, understand, because a lot of people relate to the coach, and then all of a sudden they're relating to the tadpole Jump. And it's really a beautiful messaging about the possibility and the hope and the journey of moving forward. And then for our Type A readers, we have the reader log. So we actually pull the points out. Exactly. So boom, 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 if you just need to capture that. So it's sort of a 3-in-1 book. And it's had a lot of success and a lot of fun because of the fact that it's really very, very different kind of read. It's certainly not a textbook.
Absolutely. You know, Allan, you are truly an expert on leadership. Let's talk about leaders throughout history. I mean, there's lots of different types of leaders out there. What are your insights on that?
Well, you know, if we go all the way back to the beginning, and I'm certainly not a historian, but we think about the monarchy, we think about old governments, we think about military rule, right? And we think about leadership through those lenses, you know, very defined kind of leadership. And that model for most of us today is retired, right? And I think in 2013 and moving forward, we need to be looking at a leadership where we can feel we can be a part of, that we can be engaged with, that we can have a piece of. And it's not that it's out there waiting for someone to come and tap us, but it's actually us looking in the mirror and saying, you know what, it's my turn. I want to move forward. So it's a more collaborative. Certainly we need healthy competition, but it also has a healthier ego, right? Where I was talking about the hope and possibility. So it's not that command and control kind of leadership.
You know, as I listen to you, I think, God, we live in such exciting times. You know, we don't have to be born into being the king or the queen.
That's right.
You know, we don't need to use our cavalry swords and our horse, you know, to take over an empire. You know, we don't even necessarily have to be elected now to be a leader, because what's happening is that people are showing up as leaders through just showing up.
That's right.
And I don't know of any other time in history where this type of climate exists.
Well, I think we are at a ripe time and a critical time, because if we wait much longer, I think that there are going to be bigger consequences. And I think we can't outsource leadership. We have to make it a personal conversation. We have to be able, just in our own quiet time, to say, you know, really, what is it that I want? Where's the difference that I want to make? How can I improve my path of meaningfulness and purposefulness and move it forward? And I really think it is critical that we begin to have that conversation. And we need to have it with children, you know, for this next generation.
I mean, what does this mean to someone who's sitting at home and thinking, I see an opportunity, what's someone going to do about it? I mean, what's really going on in terms of leadership and everyday people?
Well, the first piece is the mood. You know, is the mindset one where you're actually looking at it from a place of hopelessness or fear or are you looking at it from a place of possibility? And I think that we have to first sort of take stock of what's most, where are we? What's our set point right now? And what's that one small action you could take? What's the one thing that could move you forward? Because I think, as you said earlier, we tend to see, particularly with careers, this fast-moving stream, and how do I even play in this new technology and social media, and I don't even know how to engage in it. So we need to break it down so it feels more possible. I also believe it's a team sport. I really don't believe that we are meant to be lone rangers in this conversation. So who can support you? You know, if you had 3 or 4 advisors that were able to come together, that care about you, trust you, want to be able to, be in a conversation with you, get into that, right? Have a board of advisors, non-paying, but ask if you, to be able to be in a conversation of saying, here's what I'm thinking about. What do you think? How can I move it forward? You're using your ideas, it's your seeds, but you have the ability to have some support around it to move you forward. And that takes a lot of people from the couch into purposeful action.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let's talk about the role between, or the relationship between leadership and power.
That's a biggie. How much time do you have? Right. So
a little bit.
So you think about, when we think about power, first of all, is the image of positive power, right? Healthy power, or is it a little bit where the ego may not be healthy? In other words, we have to look at the ego state to say, is power being used appropriately for everyone and for ourselves, or is power being used to control or to manipulate or to push down? And we have, I respect our history today, but I really believe that the word power, we want to put the word personal in front of it. What is the personal power? What is your opportunity to be able to activate and have more power with you? And with power comes right authority. So with that authority, what does that grant you? How do you move that forward? Because when we disbelieve, that sort of personal power goes down and dissipates. So notice how much of this is about really self-reflection and just being able, from a place of possibility, begin to articulate what is that next step. How can I lean to be a little more powerful? What if I wanted to have a little more authority? What would that look like?
Right.
And who might I lean into to get some support to move from a place of disempowerment to a place of feeling empowered?
So what does intuitive leadership look like or feel like?
Yeah, we want to make sure we don't get into the airy-fairy conversation here, right? So intuitive, think about it. Intuition has been a part of us for thousands of years.
Right.
And many an idea have been birthed by people having the faith to really listen to that intuitive message and then to birth it. Organizations. I think, Stephen Jobs with all, and his amazing work that that all stem from a very powerful intuitive base. And we all have that. Again, we tend to sort of think, oh, you're intuitive, so, well, no wonder you have what you have, right? It's like, no, we all have that skill. We just have to develop it. So it really starts, again, by being able to calm the noise, listen internally, and have a logbook, right? Just start, if you do nothing else, just log that. If you can have that 120 seconds and you can capture one phrase, what would that phrase be? And just don't analyze it, don't edit it, and do that for 30 days, and I will promise you, you'll have some amazing clues there that will be able to move you forward with what's most important. So many successful people do that practice. They write everything down in a journal, and it's fascinating because I've even found that in my own practice. Like, there's that inner voice inside of us that speaks to us about what to do next, especially if we create a dialogue. Like, we ask actually ourselves, what's next for me? That's right. And we get an answer. It's fascinating how well that works. Yeah. And there's a gentleman in the bonds industry, and phenomenally successful, and people began looking to say, how is his accuracy about future bonds so amazing, right? And when they went in to look, because of his success, he had a corner office, but then he also had, the pit in the middle of the room. And in his office were no computers, no fluorescent lights. It was a couch, a chair, and a table. And he went in there 4 to 5 times a week for 20, 25 minutes, unplugged. Yeah. And I asked the question, wow, how much of that practice contributed to the phenomenal success he had by being able to really think about where the market's going? So we can look at a big executive like that, but I would ask you, every human does not every human have that possibility to begin just to, from wherever you're sitting right now, what's being said that's giving you hope and possibility, and how do we move it forward? Do you think it's important, whether it's in your home or in your business,
to create that quiet space?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
And what does that look like?
Well, it doesn't, I'm not talking about creating little, yoga studios with you, right? But it is about being able just to unplug. So if you're in a work environment which is public, take a break and just walk around outside. Get out of the building.
Right.
If you have the ability to
take some deep breaths.
Totally. A lot of it is, with practice, and a lot of practices out there talk about the power of breath work.
Yeah.
And sort of we tend to be chest breathing,
Yeah.
Okay, what's next? What are we going to do? Okay, let's go. And then we wonder why that red light's on as we're driving home. So it really is about taking those little breaks. And as I said, looking at your mindset, check your mood. If all of a sudden you've got some noise in there, what happened? And move it to the side, right? And so that you can be more purposeful, re-energized, and move back. We need to replenish more. I mean, you've seen the statistics on how we're not taking vacation time.
Right.
Billions of dollars, right? Because we're fear of, my job won't be there when I get back.
I may miss something.
Yeah. And we need to believe that we can have those small breaks to re-energize ourselves, to be more on point for what we're doing, and have more energy at the end of the day coming home.
Share with us some of the statistics. I mean, there's a lot of hard facts about exactly what you're talking about.
Right. Well, I'm cautious because it always takes me a little bit into fear and doubt when I say them, but I think it's important.
Don't be frightened.
Right. Force field yourself.
That's right.
So it bounces off you.
Right.
But when we look at, we look at how we're medicating ourselves. I think, sort of medicate is such a fascinating word because if you flip out one letter, you have meditate. Right, and I always
never thought of that.
I've always sort of been intrigued with how medicate and meditate are so, one little letter away.
Different levels of calmness.
Totally. But we have, I think 1 in 4, 1 in 5 adults now is on some kind of prescription drug, anti-anxiety and anti-depression drug, all-time high, even down to our children. We're just really medicating, and we want to, we have to respect that from one perspective, but also, are we patching, band-aiding ourselves with certain issues that we can actually correct by having more stillness, by having more mindfulness, by having more calm to give us more centeredness in our life. So, the unhappiness statistics with regard to our general lives, to our unhappiness at work. I just don't think the answer is really out there. I think, we've done our best, and here we are with amazing resources, amazing technology, and why are we so unhappy, right? And I think that we really need to come back home. We need to come back to ourselves and really take a hard break at it. When 9/11 happened, I had a couple clients who just said, that's it for me. We are moving to Montana, right? I mean, they just felt, because they both were playing a very big game, an important one, but they realized that the cost of it was actually causing them to build something that required so much external focus. And I think for every one that may have moved and simplified their lives and come back to family or whatever, I think another 9 may have thought about it, but then went right back to work. So I don't want to wait for another external event. I really think this is very possible right now. And, it just starts with one small action.
Allan, as a leadership expert, what would you say directly to the young leaders of tomorrow?
The one thing. Well, the whole discourse here is really about having that young leader being able to know who he or she is, and to have the confidence and the faith in themselves to know that they are here with perfect purpose. The career today is going to move, for most young people, they're going to have multiple careers, right? It's a very, very different backdrop than a generation ago. And so I think for our young generation, it's about really understanding who they are from a value base, what they believe in, and then to have, and to build that internal base so that they can lead from there. And force field what comes in, right? Force field how much of you accept the messaging, so it's running, so that you're running your own value system and not compromising that from maybe those external messages that are coming from you from the outside.
Absolutely. Allan Milham, thank you so much for being here and giving us some amazing and insightful ideas about leadership. Thank you.
It's great.